Carrie Lake has been talking about for a while, the big lawsuit she's bringing on to challenge the horrible election process that she has yet to prove why it's horrible. But she's finally actually filed the lawsuit, and it is a mess. And so we'll discuss that in a second. It definitely is not at all the groundbreaking and demolishing story that she would have hoped, with the election being horrible, because as we know, those claims aren't just not true. And they've built a reputation, the Carrie Lakes, the Trumps, that when they make these types of claims, we can know pretty much that they're likely without merit. But here's this being reported on ABC, and then we'll dive into some more specific aspects of it. After long refusing to commit to accepting the results of her race if she lost, Republican Kari Lake on Friday filed the legal challenge she's been threatening in the aftermath of losing the Arizona governor's race. A civil complaint was filed Friday with all of these individuals involved in the state government. There are multiple falsehoods, can you imagine, guys, and distorted assertions included in the lawsuit that echo the failed legal challenges brought by former President Donald Trump's team to overturn the 2020 election. The lawsuit seeks extraordinary, unprecedented, and likely unlawful relief of fully overturning the state's election and certifying her as the winner instead of Hobbs. So it demands that either you can make Carrie Lake the governor in a response to this lawsuit that has no evidence, or you can do a new election. And that's kind of the set of options that have become pretty common on the side of the Trumpsters and the MAGA people. They'll always say after they lose, okay, either the way that you make this right is you just declare me the winner even though I lost, or you do a whole new election. And if that one doesn't go my way, then I'll keep doing this and we'll be in a cycle forever. Well, in this lawsuit, there were so many wild parts of it. One of them, as Yahoo News reports, quote, "The eyes of the country are on Arizona." The lawsuit begins, says Yahoo News, quote, "The results of that poll are stunning. 72%, this is in the lawsuit, 72% of likely voters said they agree with Lake's statement, including 45% who strongly agree." So they cited some poll saying that people agree with Lake's claims. Okay, who cares? How does that connect to the validity of the evidence you're supposed to be presenting? And then, as this article continues, speaking of trying to undermine democracy, Lake's lawsuit claims that, quote, "hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots infected the election in Maricopa County, and that thousands of Republican voters were disenfranchised due to long lines on election day. Equipment was, quote, hacked, and printer failures were intentional misconduct intended to deny Carrie Lake her crown." Never does, and that's, you can see if you're watching today and not listening, that this is intertwining quotes from the actual lawsuit and the op-ed that I'm reading from. But as it highlights, never does her lawsuit acknowledge that voters affected could simply drop their untabulated ballots in a secure box to be counted later. So the one bit, and I'm kind of trying to race through this so we can understand it all quickly, the one real thing that they can point to is that there was issues with the tabulator machines on election day that were resolved. And what they don't note when they talk about that is the voters didn't get disenfranchised. They learned, okay, the tabulator might be broken, just put your ballot in this box, and then once we get the tabulators fixed, which they did on election day, we'll put them through and all will be well. And that's what happened, and no one was disenfranchised, and that's why there is no claim to be made here. Continuing, meanwhile, the lawsuit claims, quote, "tens of thousands of early ballots with mismatched signatures were counted, a fact that Lake and her lawyers know despite not having a single one to offer as evidence of the county's diabolical plot." If tens of thousands of early ballots had mismatched signatures, they could present at least one, which they didn't. And that's how you understand how silly this is. And the last element of this I'll read. The rest of their allegations are based on observations by roving attorneys, poll observers and workers, partisan experts, and one unnamed whistleblower who claims to have seen third-party workers slipping their family members' ballots into the pile after the election was over. So that's the other element. If you have built up an audience of people who believe your claims, then you can get some of them to come out and say, "I saw something very fishy when I was in line." And we saw the other day, she was reading from an affidavit or just some statement that someone made who felt like he was disenfranchised, and she's reading it all seriously. You know, I showed up after the polls had closed and they didn't let me vote. Yeah, I would hope so. What are we talking about? Well, the last element that was so funny of this whole kind of lawsuit debacle was apparently she wasn't able to get some of the normal Republican lawyers who deal with these types of election lawsuits because they looked at probably the preliminary evidence and said, what are you talking about? Or the lack thereof, I should say. And so instead, she got people kind of apparently who were also involved in the Cyber Ninjas Arizona audit, if you remember that. After the 2020 election, there's so much background if you haven't heard all this, but after the 2020 election, Trump was claiming Arizona was fraudulent, so then they got very pro-Trump individuals, a part of the Cyber Ninja group, to do an audit. And the funniest part about this was, as NBC writes, rather than finding that Trump defeated President Joe Biden in the competitive swing state's most populous county, and again, this is a pro-Trump group, Cyber Ninjas tallied 99 additional votes for Biden and 261 fewer votes for Trump than previously counted. So there were so many issues with this Cyber Ninjas audit, as you can probably imagine just by the name of it. But even they, I don't know if it's because they were bad at counting or because this is actually what they found that Biden won by more, Trump lost by more, which is hilarious when you're going in there trying to prove Trump's claims of election fraud. Absolutely wild. And finally, here is the logic of Carrie Lake. She put out on Twitter or somewhere, it's all rigged like pro wrestling. If you think Carrie Lake, Dr. Oz, and Herschel Walker lost without a rigged election, you're an idiot. And then it's quoting Wayne Root, I guess. Really? Is it really idiotic to assume, setting aside Kari Lake and whoever else she listed there, is it dumb to assume Herschel Walker would lose? Come on, don't give me that.